We are back. Season 2, Episode 2 of Goal Oriented is here. I'm joined by Colton and Mason, other sports editors of the Daily. We have a video now, guys. Not the best looking crew. We're the shorts desk, but how's it going?
Going good. Just talk to players. This is our first time doing this, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, hopefully you like what you see on camera. If not, let us know, and we'll go back to a regular pod. But hopefully this is going to add some more intrigue to what we're doing.
Thanks to Colin behind the scenes, our producer. He set up the sign and these cool lights above us and this whole table setup. He knows how to use a camera and how to use audio equipment, and we don't. So props to him for setting this up for us because we are not technically as advanced as he is.
Yeah, shout out Colin.
Guys, how was your week?
Yeah, pretty good. I've only been to 2 classes so far this week, so I can't complain. I had like 2 others that were canceled, so it's good. We've been hitting up Brent Venables and the coaches. We've been talking to players. So Nebraska week, it's flown by. Week 3 already.
Yeah, I mean, this is the time last year that we started this pod. It's sort of weird having these back-to-back years against Nebraska because last year, obviously, so many different things have happened since then, but it's kind of the back-to-back thing is sort of odd, I guess, knowing that both of these teams are playing again, but they're obviously still so much different. I mean, obviously, no more Scott Frost. Casey Thompson is now the quarterback. No more Adrian Martinez, even though...
By the way, OU has a completely different team
and
coach.
Yeah, so, but last week was Kent State week. OU won that game 33-3. A little bit of a slow first-half start. You guys want to recap what happened there?
Yeah, you guys were probably surprised when you looked at the score and it was 3-0 Kent State with like a minute left in the second quarter. Just the offense was not clicking early. Run game really struggled. I think they had 6 total rushing yards at
6
halftime.
or 7.
When Kent State had like 96. So that was very troubling for the Sooners in the first half. But yeah, also just, I mean, in the first half, the passing game really wasn't working until the second half. They just were like, Marvin Mims, he's down there somewhere.
Yeah, screw it, Marvin Mims down there somewhere.
Yeah,
but no, I mean, the running game was, Levy talked about it, that he thinks he was sort of trying to force that a little bit, and when he should have gone to the pass more because it started working, and that's what he said as much, and they needed a spark offensively, so they decided to go get a score. Brent Venables called a really smart timeout, that possession before on defense, so they had some extra time to go score. They went straight into a 2-minute drill, and luckily Marvin got set up on that left side, Dylan's arm side, and he found him open for those 3 consecutive passes before he hit the long one and scored and gave OU a lead they didn't look back on. So
and Drake Stoops had some big plays in the second half as well.
Yep, and we really got to see the first glimpses of Dylan really letting it fly in that second half, and those are definitely a few dime times in there.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that stuck out to me, too, is Jeff Levy saying for as many guys as they kind of switched around, not having Wanya Morris last week, he felt like the O-line played pretty good. Dylan Gabriel took a couple sacks in the second half, and honestly, I think he even was kind of pretty candid about the fact that those weren't the O-line's fault, that, whether it was they were covered up out there and he really didn't have anyone to throw to or whatever it was, but like he didn't get rid of the ball. He maybe held on to it too long, and so that's something that they can definitely improve on in terms of like his reads and stuff. And we'll get into it a little bit more in a little bit, but they expect to have Wanya Morris back this week, so that's going to be a huge boost for the O-line, which should mean in principle the running game's that much better, and then that opens up the play action and stuff. For
sure, and I think that Wanya being back at right tackle is really going to allow Anton to be at his preferred spot on the left side. And guys, I mean, the offensive line has just really not been what we thought it's been so far, and that's been probably the weakest point of this team so far. McCade Matoyer's been in and out at left guard. Tyler Guyton's been at left tackle, been at right tackle. He's an inexperienced guy, but they've said he's played pretty well for getting his first few starts. Just what is it about that unit that could maybe be a little bit better, and how are they hoping to maybe add from that with Wanya?
Well, obviously when Wanya comes back, it's going to be a little bit easier, but just finding that consistent, this guy's going to play right tackle, this guy's going to play left, and then getting the guards right, and then obviously Andrew Rames kind of solidified himself as the number 1 guy at center, but it's just been a revolving door, so finding some consistency would really help this group out. But guys, back to the Kent State thing. When that score was the way it was, I mean, it's been, since we've done this podcast last time, A&M's lost, Notre Dame's lost. There's been some big upsets. Nebraska lost, Scott Frost got fired. What were you guys kind of thinking during that game? Like, Is this going to happen here?
Yeah, I mean it very well could have. Like if they don't turn some things on, it gets away from them maybe. But they all talked about after the game, like the biggest thing for OU was they didn't panic. Everybody stayed calm. They stayed together. And because of that, they were able to kind of turn things around. And so they also talked a lot about after the game about just not taking stuff for granted, right? Like every week it's important because they know that they're going to get their best. And so they just stuck together and they made it happen.
For sure. I mean, that's what Brent said after the game, is that he knew that this Kent State team would give them a tough test this early in the season, and he was sort of expecting the game to go the way it did, is what he said. And Kent State really did some things that frustrated them offensively, right? I mean, Jeff Lebby talked about giving them props to what they were able to do, and he was having a hard time adjusting to some of the things they were doing schematically on defense. And then they had, went to the halftime, like Mason said, and at halftime they came together. They were calm, and they figured it out and had that big third quarter. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good for this team knowing that they can stay calm in those instances, and especially having a veteran guy like Dylan, who's, like they say, he's going to be the same guy every day. I mean, that's huge for the offense.
He's the same guy every day in the building.
Yeah, in the building is the important emphasis. They have to be in the building too.
Yeah, and Jeff Lebby said yesterday, the reason that this offense was able to come back like it was in the second half is because of Dylan. And Jeff Lebby also said that he feels like this Oklahoma offense is in a better spot than his previous stops, Ole Miss, UCF, during like week 2. So that was pretty encouraging for OU fans to hear.
For sure. Part of that I think is Dylan's experience just being like several years older now and having run Lebby's offense before.
The system helped.
Yeah, but I asked him about that, tonight after practice, and was like, do you kind of take stock of how far you've come since, like, you were in 2019, you're UCF, you're thrown into starting as a freshman as your second game, and he kind of just put it as like, it goes back to how they prepared. And so it sounds like maybe in terms of preparation, there's been some tears. Like maybe when they started out at UCF, like because of it being so random that he was thrust into being the starter, he maybe didn't have as much time to get ready. And now that it's like from day one, Lebby was like, yeah, we went and got Dylan because he's going to be our starter. That builds up the confidence for him. And then throughout the fall camp, through spring practice and stuff like that, he's just been consistently building up the preparation and getting ready so that, he always talks about it. And other quarterbacks like Davis Bevel has said the same thing, like just always be ready to go is what it is. So I think the reason that they're feeling that way about where the offense is at right now is because they were so well prepared with what they did in practice and stuff.
For sure. And I mean, he said it before, to run that tempo offense, you have to have a quarterback you trust. And who does he trust more than a quarterback he's worked with before that is known for being a steady guy? And he's maybe not the talent level that we've seen of Caleb Williams or not Spencer Rattler. Who am I? But Caleb Williams or a Jalen Hurts that we've seen in the past. But, he's doing everything the right way. Like they said, they haven't turned the ball over, which has been huge for that offense. And you get that first down, and they've been cooking. So that's really been the biggest thing is they get that first down, they get in tempo, and they're feeling good about where they are.
A little off topic, but Mason was talking about how Jeff went and grabbed Dylan right away. This team could have had the opposite quarterback this week in Casey Thompson. Brent Venables talked about it a little bit today. Casey had Oklahoma in his, top 5 whenever he decided to leave Texas. So that's just a little tidbit, but I thought that was pretty interesting. But Dylan Gabriel's their guy, and so far he's looked pretty good in my opinion.
There's a very realistic reality where Casey Thompson is OU's quarterback right now. Dylan makes it to class at UCLA, isn't eligible. Casey's probably their guy right now. I mean, Casey, the son of Charles Thompson, former OU quarterback, obviously is from Moore.
Brother Kendall played at OU.
Yeah, brother of Kendall. Comes from an OU family. He's from Oklahoma, from Moore, played at Newcastle High his senior year, played at Southmore High the years before that. There's very real possibility that he's there. Obviously, he grew up with Drake Stoops, and he grew up around the program because of Charles, and he was obviously actively recruited by OU, and it didn't work out. But there's a very real chance that this guy was actually OU's quarterback right now, and it's probably they'd feel fine about it. But he's certainly not, probably Dylan Gabriel.
Where was Casey Thompson in Dynasty?
Well, so as far as ahead as I'm in my NCAA dynasty right now, which will probably be a recurring topic on this podcast this season, I believe Casey Thompson had graduated. It was Hudson Card at Texas.
Okay.
I'm the coach at LSU, Balthazar Goncharov. Shout out to my guy. And we defeated Texas in the I don't even remember what, I think the Fiesta Bowl last season with Hudson Card. So that's how it goes. But yeah, back to Casey Thompson, right? I mean, like, after his redshirt season at Texas, his very first year there, he literally entered the portal and he actually enrolled at OU. And then I believe how the story goes is Charles, even though Charles, being a former OU quarterback, talked him out of it. So yeah, it honestly, like, it would have been like not a bad fit at all for Casey Thompson to come to OU. I kind of wonder about Jackson Dart as well. It seemed like they made a really big push for Jackson Dart even after they had Dylan in the bag. But yeah, it's crazy to sit here and think about the fact that Casey Thompson almost went to OU 3 times, but now he's playing for the second of their historic rivals.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. You don't see that a lot. Dad played at OU, brother played at OU, you grew up in Oklahoma, and you go play for Texas and Nebraska. It's pretty crazy.
And for sure, and I mean, now obviously he's playing for a Nebraska team that has its own chaos going up there in Lincoln right now. Obviously, Scott Frost was let go Sunday after they lost to Georgia Southern. And Casey's really just been trying to make his way for wins on that Nebraska team right now. So, guys, I mean, what is OU going to need to do this Saturday to sort of, I guess, not overreact to and think this team is just an easy win when they might be playing for something more than just that team, but maybe the entire program itself?
Keep the pass rush going, lock it down in the back end. I think Brent Venables said today that Key Lawrence, who tweaked a hammy and didn't play last week against Kent State, that he's hopeful that he'll be back. That's a big get for them to have him back at safety this week as one of the better defenders in their secondary. So, yeah, I mean, like, Casey's throwing, and I think these 2 games he's throwing for like 300 yards, and they've lost both times. So, they're like, but he's also made some mistakes within that. I know he threw an interception against Northwestern, and I don't remember against Georgia Southern, but I would bet he did since they lost. So, yeah, like, they need to produce a turnover, which so far they've been relatively successful at doing. I think that they had a fumble recovery, Justin Harrington's interception against Kent State. So, yeah, do that, and then Ted Roof seems pretty pleased with how the defensive line's been, but there's room for improvement, and they just need to get him in the pass rush.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think up front they need to be very physical. I think this game's going to be close. It's in Lincoln. Brent said today every time he's kind of had chaos going on wherever he's been, the very next week is when you respond. So it's going to be a rowdy environment. Those fans always fill up that stadium. So I think what OU needs to do is keep their foot on the gas pedal on offense and stay physical on defense, like Mason was saying, specifically on the defensive line.
For sure, and continuing that defensive line dominance they've had so far. I mean, they rank first in TFLs, third in sacks nationally. Haven't really seen an OU defense be able to do that in recent years, but that's going to be a huge component to beating the Huskers in Lincoln. Obviously, just given the challenges of that stadium, they can fill that out, and it's going to be a big rivalry game. And what better way to get that program back on track after losing a coach, after losing a tough game for such a historically successful program than to get back on track with a win over one of its historic rivals. I mean, it would be a huge storyline, and OU's trying its best to stay away from that.
Right, absolutely. I mean, we're literally, I think, going to see a team this weekend that's going all out because they're essentially, in a way, playing for their program to have any pride left. And I think the one other thing that's interesting about Casey, too, is I think as opposed to Adrian Martinez last year where it was just like contain the run, now you've got a guy that likes to throw on the run. So that's going to be another thing to watch for as well.
And he can make off-script plays. We saw the crazy one against Northwestern in Dublin, and I think it was Reggie Grimes today, or maybe it was Isaiah Coe yesterday, talking about like they're preparing for those. They're watching Casey at Texas and Nebraska, and he can make those wild plays outside of the pocket. So that's something to look for. But also, Brent Venables is a guy that has a lot of history in Lincoln and at Nebraska. He got emotional today talking about the 2000 game, where he regrets not celebrating with the team. 2005, obviously, lost his mom the week of that. What did you guys see from Brent today when he really opened up after losing his mom in 2005?
I mean, to start, we were getting sort of a dry Brent conference. I think he showed up a little late. I'm not going to speculate, but he seemed a little bit checked out of it. But he got started talking about those Nebraska and, reminiscing on some of those days. And he's an emotional guy. He's proven that. He's talked about that. The teammates have talked about that. And I think just really looking back was some of those things that he's sort of regretted. I mean, we were just talking about the other day about what Clemson has done for that guy and how much more in touch he's became with sort of, I guess, his aspects on life and how he views life. And, at the time he was a younger defensive coordinator, so focused on, being prepared for the next week and so focused on football that he wasn't focusing on, the just greatness of the atmosphere he was in with, the field goals being torn down and OU being Nebraska for the first time in a few years and really solidifying themselves as national championship contenders, which they later went on to do that season. But it was just, and obviously 05 was a huge year for him, and he talked about Rufus Alexander and all the guys playing for him because his mom had died that week. And, he also has history Nebraska week, and I think that sentiment that he sort of shared with the media today when he started tearing up was just pretty indicative of how much he's changed since he was at Oklahoma in those early days, how much different of a man he's became and how much he's grown just, holistically, like he likes to say, with how he thinks about things. And, it's one of the reasons that he's a head coach right now, and there's one of the reasons that he's excelling the way he is, and especially with the way he's been able to relate to recruits as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating to kind of study just how he's changed as a character since then. I mean, I think when you talk to former players that played for him in his first stint at OU, the thing that always comes up is that he's just tough as nails, and you were never going to see him really, I guess, let loose emotionally. And now just seeing the humanity of Brent Venables, I think is really like telling, like you said, of what Clemson's done for him. But just it's kind of cool to see a different wrinkle than just the passion, the energy is still there, but to also see the humanity is kind of unique.
For sure, and obviously the last time that OU was in Lincoln was 2009, which was a game they lost 10-3. Landry Jones was a freshman getting a start there and threw 5 interceptions. Huge defense game. Obviously, Ndamukong Suh had a huge game, who later went on to be a Heisman finalist that year, I believe. Prince Amukamara, who was a first-round pick as well. OU had a great defensive game, but it came down to Landry Jones throwing a pick and Nebraska coming up with the ball and OU's 1 yard line. It was a play action pass that Nebraska scored its lone touchdown on. But I asked Brent about it, what he remembers from that, and he just remembers it being such a tough game. But he was excited that the next year OU got revenge in the 2010 Big 12 championship game, which was the last game OU Nebraska played before last season. So OU's now getting that second, I guess, new revisiting moment while they go to Lincoln for the first time since 2009. And he's hoping that they can win instead of lose the last time they were in Lincoln.
I'm surprised. You asked him a follow-up about, did you feel like that game got its proper send-off? And I was honestly kind of surprised he didn't expand on that because, like last week with the stuff he said about the college football playoff and how it's changing and stuff like that, he's just like, he loves the pageantry of college football as much as anyone. He's a complete college football purist. And so I think whether or not he completely verbalized it or not, I think he and plenty of other people are kind of like, man, it's probably going to be the last time OU and Nebraska play each other for a while. I know Joe C or whoever is athletic director will maybe try to schedule something in non-con down the road, but with the SEC transition, all that stuff is so uncertain for OU.
I think they're scheduled currently for 2029, 2030, but with the SEC stuff.
Right. Will that happen? Will they have to shake things up based on what their conference schedule is because they can't play that week or something?
Yep.
So replacing Scott Frost at Nebraska is another former Huskers quarterback in Mickey Joseph, the brother of former Denver Broncos head coach Vance Joseph. Colton, why don't you take us through Mickey Joseph's background and why he was maybe the fit guy for that interim role?
Yeah, well, I think for starters, you mentioned it. He was the quarterback at Nebraska. Obviously got hurt in 1990, which kind of ended his career, and he moved into
playing against
Oklahoma in Norman. But yeah, that leg injury, pretty severe. Everyone actually kind of ended his career. Wound up entering the coaching ranks, bounced around a little bit. Actually has some Oklahoma ties, was the head coach at Langston University, coached at UCO for a little bit, but coached at LSU, really found his groove there as the receivers coach. Scott Frost brought him over pretty recently to Nebraska, and he just kind of found his fit. I mean, I think the offense has looked pretty good to start this season, and they felt like he was the right guy to step into that interim role, and I think it goes back to just being around the program, being a Nebraska guy. So
we listened a little bit today to his press conference that he had, and honestly, good for that guy, man. He just seems like a very genuine dude.
No, I'm a huge Mickey Joseph fan, and I think as they're looking for a new, depending on how this season unfolds, but as they're looking for a new head coach to take over, I think Mickey Joseph has to be in that list of guys you're looking at, right?
For sure, and I mean, Mickey obviously, I think he was. I would imagine he was the connection with Nebraska and Casey Thompson, given Mickey's connection with Charles Thompson when they were at Langston
Charles
together.
Thompson coached with him at Langston, yes.
Yeah, so I'd imagine that's where that connection came from. But, yeah, I mean, Mickey talked about it as much today as they're not going to change much. His sole focus is making sure that his players are ready to go and that they're doing okay. And he knows they were devastated with the news because they all love Scott Frost. He loves Scott Frost, but, obviously their athletic department understood that it was probably time for Scott Frost to move on given some of their recent struggles, and hopefully Mickey can bridge them the rest of the season and help some of those players that are in a weird spot, and maybe he ends up being the head coach. But who are some of the short list of guys that are maybe potential candidates? My first one is obviously Iowa State coach Matt Campbell. Seems like a pretty prime one.
Well, yeah, before I go into that, I was actually talking to somebody today who knows Mickey really well, and he said expect those guys to play hard Saturday, and there's not going to be a step back from Scott Frost. But yeah, the Nebraska job, I think Matt Campbell would be a great one. Another couple other names I'll throw in there: Lance Leipold, Kansas; Chris Kleiman, Kansas State. Mason, you got any?
No, I mean, I've mentioned this before, but per NCAA Dynasty, Gus Malzahn will be Nebraska's coach next season, but they just lost to Louisville at UCF, so maybe not. Given that, the good thing for Nebraska, I think, regardless of who they hire, and I think the candidates you mentioned are all, they kind of fit that mold. I think they're a possibility. The good thing for Nebraska, right, is they got a fan base that's sticking with them through thick and thin. I mean, the way that people traveled to Dublin for the Northwestern game,
How many straight sellouts?
Like 384, I think, is Saturday.
Going back to the 60s?
Yeah,
crazy. They still got it going for them. So I think whoever they hire is going to make people happy. I wouldn't be surprised if Mickey was promoted, having been a former Nebraska player, because I think that they're really entrenched in the tradition component of college football. And
Scott Frost.
Yeah, and Trev Alberts, their athletic director, is a former player too. So that's just kind of their thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mickey turns his team around, they play fairly decent down the stretch, and he just becomes the head coach. And that would be a really cool success story. For sure.
And I think me and Colton were messing around with this earlier, but what if Nebraska just throws $9 million, $10 million at Zach Taylor, Norman High alum, Super Bowl last year. He's got some good stuff going on with the Bengals, who have Jamar Chase at wide receiver, who Mickey Joseph obviously coached at LSU. Yep. He was there. He recruited Jamar Chase and had Justin Jefferson and that whole squad of receivers that are now some of the best in the NFL. So he's no pushover, especially as a recruiter. He could definitely.
Taylor's a former Nebraska quarterback. So
exactly.
That's literally the prerequisite.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about throwing the bag at Zach Taylor. I'm talking about throwing the bag at Mark Stoops, Sam Pittman.
For sure. Oh,
$10 million. I mean, I think that's a long shot. I think Sam Pittman's is with the Hogs forever till he dies. But Mark Stoops.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that Zach Taylor was the lowest paid NFL head coach last season.
True.
And I mean,
He did just go to the Super Bowl, and he has Joe Burrow for his career. But
for sure.
But you never know.
I'm pretty sure he got a raise this offseason, but it's still only $4.5 million. I'd have to look what Scott Frost is getting paid, but there's a legitimate chance that he could get his salary literally doubled to go to Lincoln.
I think Scott's lowered this year. I think it was like 7 and now it's like 6.
Get ready for it. Get ready for this. On a message board somewhere in America, there's right now rumors circulating that Bob Stoops will be Nebraska's head coach.
I mean,
I kid you not. It literally will come up.
He's been the coach at USC, Florida State, Auburn.
I could probably find a message board for Bob Stoops becoming the Youngstown State head coach and returning back to his old stomping
Yeah,
grounds.
like he's going there to watch Mark play
Kirk
against him this
Ferentz
week.
Kirk Ferentz.
Oh, and then we
Yeah.
got
Getting the love right now.
You tell me Bob's not pulling up at Iowa for a fat bag?
We have to talk about the Bob Stoops cameo. The epic, just absolutely, hear me out when I say this, maybe the best troll job I've ever seen in my entire life.
I would agree.
For some backstory, Iowa fans, Iowa's offense has been so bad under Brian Ferentz, Kirk Ferentz's son, that they made out Cameos, which Cameos is a website where you can pay people to talk to you, and they paid what is their basketball coach's name?
I know who you're talking about, but I can't come up with his name.
Fran McCaffrey.
Yeah,
They paid Fran McCaffrey to be like, hey, Brian, I know you're going through a tough time, but your family still loves you. Maybe it's time for you to move on. They did the same thing to Bob Stoops, and there's a video on the internet that you could find of Bob Stoops saying, Brian, your family loves you, but I think it's about time for you to leave the family business. They don't understand that they're talking about Brian Ferentz, but everyone that's trolling them is.
Yeah.
And Spencer Petras, still their quarterback. I was talking to my friend.
I don't think they have anyone
we saw
else.
that today.
I was talking to my friend who's an Iowa fan. He is just like on the please get rid of Brian Ferentz. Literally put anyone else back there. I could call a play better than him. But they're winning games somehow. So, well, actually, they lost Cyhawk last week.
So while we're on this topic, it's way off topic, but Nebraska, don't you guys think that Nebraska could and should be a Wisconsin, an Iowa? Like, I think under Scott Frost, they kind of tried to be something that they're not. I think Nebraska could win 7-8 games a year if they went to that Wisconsin, Iowa brand of football.
For sure, and I mean, that's been their brand of football throughout history is
Yeah.
You think of Nebraska, you think of toughness and hard-nosed football, but
I think they got a little bit away from that under Frost.
yeah, that's definitely, I think that's a fair opinion to have. I just wonder, I haven't paid attention to enough Nebraska games to really understand, but I just wonder it's so much harder to win football in that way, just given how recruiting and NIL and all
like
that thing
Wisconsin
works.
wins 8 games a year or more.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
That is true.
I think that's kind of the way they need to go. Jim Leonard would be another good candidate.
What they need is for their boosters to build some sort of ridiculous attraction that will net all the recruits. Because I mean, like, to be honest, like I know they used to recruit like solely on like their name or whatever, but like Frost's recruiting class have been really bad, and like it's consistently getting harder to recruit to Lincoln, Nebraska. Like I don't. Again, none of us have been there yet. And I think Colton, you maybe have a little bit, but like I don't know what this town looks like when we pull up this weekend.
The Coldest Crawford got a AC NIL deal.
Yeah, good for that guy, but he's also out, I think, for like the season maybe.
Yeah, he is.
But like, yeah, there's just like it's just not. It's so weird that it's not what it was up there, and I don't really think you can put a finger on it being one thing. So I don't know. Maybe they need to like really kind of revamp some stuff and see if that can help them in their recruiting space, but finding a coach that really connects with recruits will help.
And Barry Tremont asked a really insightful question to Brent today is, what is your thought process on what has gone on in Lincoln? And he just said, really the difference between winning and losing is so small. Obviously, Nebraska's had 13 consecutive single-digit losses. We're looking at a much different program if they're able to close out some of those, close losses they've had. And that's just another thing about winning and losing, but especially, like you said, recruiting to Lincoln is so tough. I was talking to Dylan today, and we're sort of joking around, and I was like, Dylan's from, obviously, Hawaii, played in Orlando at UCF, two very different coastal places. I was like, you ever been to Nebraska? He's like, no. I was like, you ever thought you'd ever go to Nebraska? And he was like, not exactly my ideal vacation spot. So, I mean, yeah, there's not much there. Like Brent said today, I mean, him being as a kid, growing up in Kansas, him and his family would just steal corn from the cornfields. So
yeah, that happened.
Well, and that's not just Nebraska. Like, it's everywhere, too. Like, think about what OU would be like right now if they had gotten a coach that was not Brent Venables. Like, we were joking around earlier today about the day that we spent an entire day at the local airport because we thought Matt Rule was flying into town to be OU's next head coach. Like, imagine how, like, culturally different this place would be with
Matt Rule,
else.
Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, that's. I know Garen Emig from the Tulsa World has posited that as what would potentially work out pretty well for both sides. And
I mean, he's probably going to be gone.
With all respect to Baker, it's not like Carolina's really doing anything right now.
Yeah.
So,
well, guys, you want to get into some predictions?
Man, I think I'll start first, and I've penciled this as a trap game for OU for a few months now, even before Scott Frost left, and now I'm starting to think that this game might be tougher now that Scott Frost is gone, just given how locked in I think this team might be playing for something more than just a win here. I'm going to go pretty close. I'm going 27-24 OU.
Yeah, I know I said it was going to be – I think it's going to be a close game earlier on. I do think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a close game for a while, but I think in the fourth quarter, Oklahoma, puts a little bit of a margin there, and I'm going to go 38-21 OU.
Last year's score, I believe, was 26-13. I'm going to go 29-13. I think OU gets a couple more field goals. I think the defense still plays well enough that they kind of limit the damage Nebraska does. And I think that in the second half, I think maybe OU will kind of run it up in the first half, and then in the second half, they'll maybe slow it down a little bit, but pick up a few field goals. And, I mean, you would love to come out there and see them just blow the doors off and see this offense be what it was at times against UTEP, right? Like, it almost felt like there was points where it was like, yeah, you guys are like firing on all cylinders, running like exactly. There's just like this feeling that you had of like the whole thing that everybody's been saying about smell blood in the water. Like they smelt it and they were just like, go, 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 21-0. You would love to see that again, but they're still obviously working through some stuff. And I think Nebraska is going to be the best. The defense isn't great for them. I think it's going to be the best defense they've seen so far. So yeah, I'll take 29-13, and it'll be a fairly decent first half with some field goals in the second half to keep running it off. And I think the defense, we haven't talked about them much at all during this, but I think the defense has really been the X factor for OU so far with how well Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman are playing, and I think that they'll continue that this weekend.
Yeah, if Billy Bowman has the type of games that he's been having, he had that huge forced fumble. That was probably the biggest play of the game for the defense against Kent State. I think there's going to be some of those late turnovers created by this defense led by Ted Riff and Brent Venables, and I think that's where kind of OU takes a jump in the fourth quarter.
For sure, and we're starting to see Danny Stutzman really turn into that almost all-American type player. I mean, 14 tackles I think it was last week, 12, but 4 tackles for loss. I mean, he's playing out of his mind, running all over the place right now. And, I mean, yeah, just to your guys' point, I mean, Nebraska's going to be a tough place to play. I think it's interesting this offense has elected to receive both games this season after they've won the coin toss. And I think that's interesting. I mean, I think the offense really wants to get going, and it really screws with their pace if they don't get that first down. And I think that's going to be a huge point for them. It's obviously something so small, but OU gets that first down, and they get rolling on offense with their pace, and that's really what they want to do. And they weren't able to get that in those first couple drives against Kent State, and it really, really got them out of rhythm, and you could really tell how much that can make them struggle. So I think those are the sort of give and takes about running an tempo offense is you don't have the fast start. You can't, keep snowballing into a huge margin. But like I said, I mean, you don't get that huge start. You might be pretty slow out of the gates.
Yeah, and I found it very interesting. Jeff Lebby talking about this. He admitted after the UTEP game, like, I want to establish the run a little bit more. After the Kent State game, he admitted that kind of like I tried to force the run a little bit too much, and maybe there were times where he should have thrown the ball. So I'm interested if they do elect to receive to start this game. Kind of what that balance is on offense.
Maybe this is the week they find that balance. You definitely, I think that's incumbent upon them to get it early before they get into conference play, because it looks like really there's not, aside from like Kansas, it feels like there's a lot less pushovers in the Big 12 this year than there typically is. So we'll see. We'll see.
I saw West Virginia ranked 10th in a Big 12 rankings the other day, and I watched them against Pitt.
And they were a pretty physical team, yeah. I mean, they lost to Kansas last week, but Kansas obviously much improved. Texas Tech is getting votes for the AP. They beat Houston last week.
Yep, Kansas State.
There's no, top dog in this conference. Obviously, it's so crazy to think that this OU team is ranked number 6 right now, but there's not that really top dog, but there's top to bottom a really, really, really balanced league.
We're also making fun of Kansas, and I know it's a completely different team than last year, but Kansas was up 10-0 on OU at halftime last year.
Kansas is 2-0.
I think everybody's just kind of blocked that from their memory. Yeah, Leipold's got it going on. You said, I mean, he honestly, he seems to connect with people, and there's maybe an outside shot for him to be the Nebraska coach.
That would be a huge loss for Kansas, though.
Yeah, it would set them back another 20 years probably. They might have to ask Mangino to come out of retirement.
They might, yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna bring the Xbox for us to play NCAA at the Airbnb That'll be fun. Don't know a whole lot about Lincoln. Been looking up the food scene because that's what I do, even though I get made fun of for my poor taste and my really.
Me and Mason are a little picky.
Yeah, but at least we eat what we like, right?
Yeah.
But what are you guys interested in doing in Lincoln?
Well, I think I might take the Brent Venables approach. First scene of corn, I think I might just snap.
We're just
one.
gonna steal some corn.
No, I'm not gonna do that. I respect the farmers and what they do. I'm not gonna be stealing their corn, but I'll think about it.
Dude, if we take some corn, some guy might come at us at the game.
Yeah.
He legit might be at the game next day and just try to beat us up. I don't know.
Their fans might be a little bit too nice for that, but
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the Ted Roof story.
Oh yeah.
Anybody want to tell
Yeah,
that?
tell the Ted Roof story
Yeah,
real quick,
so-
Colton.
Ted Roof, when he's defensive coordinator at Penn State, what was it, 2012?
Yeah, so like
2012,
right after
yeah.
he won the Natty with Auburn,
Yes.
he got fired and went to Penn
yeah.
State? Or did he just leave of his own volition?
I'm pretty sure he got fired.
I'm
I
not
can't
sure.
remember.
But anyway, Ted Roof, Oklahoma defensive coordinator at Penn State in 2012, standing on the sidelines in Lincoln. Obviously, they're playing Nebraska. He's holding his call sheet, or his play call sheet, in his hand. The Nebraska wind comes, swoops the call sheet out of his hands into the stands. And a Nebraska fan was nice enough to pick it up and bring it back to him. And Ted joked with us yesterday. He was like, if I was in the SEC,
I wish he would have finished that sentence. It would have been funny, but
Yeah.
I think we know what he was saying.
The
Exactly.
Black Watch, man. They were almost exposed to the world.
The black shirts
They would've got
versus the
got.
Black Watch.
Yeah, this week,
This
man.
weekend.
I mean,
the
there's
Black
a-
Watch is back.
There's
Yes,
a
sir.
decent chance that there's just like 3 plays on there. It's just like attack. And
But
hit
how
them hard.
classy or mind-boggling is that a Nebraska fan brought it back to him?
If that's an LSU fan, they're selling that so fast. That thing's gonna be on eBay in like 5 minutes.
That thing's gonna go be on the other sideline in Brian Kelly's hands.
Gary Patterson is definitely just surfing eBay, and he's like, "Hey, Sark, I found this playbook."
I think it was Guerin, but he followed up, and Ted was like, he's like, is that because they were pretty nice fans up there? He's like, well, at least that guy was. So,
Yeah.
but that's pretty funny, and I wonder, someone was joking about this, but they were like, well, what would happen if that happened to Lincoln Riley? So, but he just has that little wadded up piece of paper, so it probably
Lincoln
wouldn't have been
would
that much.
freak out.
Remember the
probably-
Mike
I'm
Leach
so
at
paranoid.
OU Texas?
Oh yeah, I mean,
hiding a fake call sheet.
That was a great story by Jake Trotter.
Yeah.
Love that story.
Shout out Jake Trotter.
Lincoln just had that. He has that tiny little piece of paper that's all wadded up. So honestly, most of his plays are in his head. So it probably wouldn't have even been that big of a deal.
I mean, the way that he was just able, like on the coaches show and stuff, the little segment he did that was like,
brain tease.
that was like, hey,
Lincoln
what's this
Riley's-
play from like 5 years ago? And he just remembers it perfectly.
Lincoln Riley's brain is different. But anyway, yeah, back to Lincoln. I stopped there with Colin actually over the summer on the way to Omaha. Looking forward to being back there and being inside the stadium actually. It's pretty nice on the outside. Can't wait to see what it's like in the inside. But I'm honestly most looking forward to continuing to beat Mason in NCAA. So
We'll see about
it'll be
that.
fun.
We will
Mason
see about
plays
that.
more than all of us, and me and Colton are pretty much better than him. So.
Exactly.
But guys,
But I'm playing against the CPU on rookie.
Mason's really not that good at NCAA. Hear me out.
I'm
Mason
having
stinks.
fun. That's all that matters, right?
Anyway,
Okay, well, we got a question from our producer, Colin. Colin's going to step in here.
Hello? Okay, cool. I just had to make sure that the mic worked.
mystery question.
I know, mystery question. Okay, so there was a lot that like kind of happened this past weekend, just like in college football in general. What was probably y'all's favorite upset? Because like mine was probably just like how like poor the ending of the Baylor BYU game was. We were just watching it, and I remember looking up and seeing like just missed field goals, and I was like,
that was
dude,
insane.
it was like past midnight. I was like, they must be like miserable.
That was like the
right now.
Steelers Bengals game. on
That
Sunday.
was those were two Pac-12. That was Pac-12 after dark between
Well,
a
Big
Big
12
12
and
and an
independent,
independent team.
Yeah, but
Uh,
anyway, so like, what was y'all's like favorite like upset or favorite moment from this past weekend?
I mean, the Sun Belt turned into the Fun Belt, right? But
did.
I'm going for Marshall mostly because I just think it's funny that Marcus Freeman's 0-3 and he's been like coined as like god tier like new coach.
Henry Columby got him.
And Henry Columby, former Texas Tech, Henry Columby is running it up for the Thundering Herd. I mean, will he end up as a more famous alum than Randy Moss at Marshall? I mean, probably.
Doubtful.
No, probably. It's Henry Columby, but
Yeah.
It's destined.
he might be 27 years old by now. I swear he's been in college for 9 years.
Yeah.
I didn't even know he was at Marshall, but good for that guy, man.
Yeah.
No idea who their coach is, but good for Marshall.
We watched that game on the big screen and from the press box at the stadium. don't know. Yeah, I mean, we also watched A&M get beat by Appalachian State, and I think my favorite part of that was seeing the video of in Boone on campus of just a rush of people running.
You can't tell me that Ted Roof and TD Roof weren't dapping it up in the locker room when that happened. They definitely got hyped for that.
But anyway, App State, go Apps. I mean, good for them, and they're getting game day this week. So.
And A&M, they had that midnight rush thing that they do, and that guy was like, "Oh, App State or whatever."
That
App
video
State
is
stinks.
so cringe.
Oh, I had to Google this team to make sure that they were even real. I was really confused because Appalachia is definitely not a state. But sure enough, I found them, and they're located deep, and I mean deep in the backwoods. Just like you would think any hillbilly college that names themselves the Mountaineers.
Shaming Texas A&M is like a age-long tradition. It's like making fun of Texas. Like every sports fan, like no biases here towards OU, but like obviously just making fun of Texas is what everyone comes around. And then it's like making fun of Texas A&M is like a step under that to where you almost feel like embarrassed. Like there's no holding back when it makes fun of Texas just because Texas is just everyone makes fun of Texas, but like Texas A&M, you almost feel bad making fun of them because
we didn't pay those players anything, says Jimbo Fisher.
But anyway, like the Texas slander is warranted after the last decade that they've had. But Mason, watching that Alabama-Texas game, what were your thoughts on Texas?
All jokes. But I mean, Quinn looked like the real deal.
Quinn, like there was a play in the first half where he threw an absolute dime to Xavier Worthy, and I was just like, oh my. Like this is the guy, and then he gets hurt.
Texas looked really impressive.
At that point, might as well call it because Hudson Card with a bum angle is not going to get it done.
Well, I was really impressed with Texas's offensive line and defensive line against Alabama's pass rush. Will Anderson and those guys. Alabama's freshman offensive line, all 5 stars, really held up.
Yeah, and they're really young, obviously, like you said, offensive line holding up against Will Anderson, who's one of the best pass rushers of the last decade or so. And Quinn Ewers really showed why he was such a highly touted recruit. And I think, you can't help but look at Texas and realize that they have the talent that maybe is needed to make the jump. Now, that's been said for years now, but I don't think Texas has clearly not had someone nearly the caliber of Quinn Ewers at quarterback, and I think that's been the biggest thing that's held them back. I mean, Texas had a few good years with Sam Ehlinger, and he was nothing special. He was really good, but he wasn't, that transcendent guy, and I think that's what Texas has been missing, and I think that's what Oklahoma has had. So I think that's been the biggest difference between those two schools. And, if Quinn can stay healthy, it's looking like he has a chance to be back for Red River.
Circle that game.
Quinn
in Dallas coming back from injury, that could be a really scary sight for OU.
To get back to answering the mystery question, for that upset, I think at the time Georgia State Nebraska was so funny to me because whatever that team was that they
don't even know the name. It was such a big upset.
Whatever team they lost to because it was so embarrassing for Nebraska.
It was the only upset that resulted in a firing.
But the OU game ends and we're in the press conference and we're watching it on our phones and stuff and Venables gets done speaking and Eli Letterman from the Tulsa World goes up there with his laptop and puts it on the podium and is like, "Hey Brent, watch this. They're about to lose." Yeah. And then
I watched it on my laptop.
And then Mike Hauk, the SID, is like, "Hey Brent, I've got it on my phone. If you want to watch it, we got to get out of here." And then they start bringing the players in and it was like, man, we missed out on a premium opportunity to see Brent's reaction to the end of that
Reggie
game.
Grimes told me after the game that they were all watching it in the back, and so everybody was watching all the games Saturday, and it was a crazy Saturday.
I forgot who it was, but someone brought up to Dylan. It was like, "You see, Texas A&M lost." He was like, "Texas A&M lost?"
Yeah, that's right.
It's always funny because those players are in the locker room getting ready to go so early that they miss all of those games and then they go home and probably see it. But it's cool to get their reaction.
We even talked about how disappointed we are that we don't get to watch half the games because they go on at the same time as the OU game.
DJ was talking last night. They stay at the hotel even when it's a home game before the game's Friday night, and he said all the guys, they were watching the Bama-Texas game at 11 a.m. before they left. But yeah, I was telling these guys that's probably my biggest transition into covering these games is I don't get to sit there and watch football all day. So that's been a bit of a transition, but I'm super excited to be here. So
that's what NFL's for, man.
Yeah, Sunday I did the same thing Sunday. Yeah.
Anyway, guys, all jokes aside, appreciate you guys joining us. That was a fun pod we just recorded, and I'm really excited we have this video element. Shout out to Colin again, for our producer, Colin McDaniel, for setting this up. It's a really cool setup for us. And we're excited to go to Lincoln. We're excited to give you guys some good coverage throughout the week, so head on over to oudaily.com to catch stories from us. We think we're, really bringing some heat there. So this is Goal Oriented. We're signing off. I'm Austin. This is Colton and Mason, and we will see you guys next Tuesday.
Peace out.